Welcome back to this Return to Wellbeing series. My name is Taylor Staines and I'm from the Active Harbour team at Harbour District Council. I'm here with co-presenters Usain Khan and Jake Patoni from the South Leicestershire School Sports Partnership.
Hello, I am Jake and I'm the Health and Wellbeing Officer at the Learning South Leicestershire School Sports Partnership. The Return to Wellbeing podcast series will focus on supporting children's mental health needs as lockdown is gradually lifted and they return back to school. In today's episode, we'll be talking about how to help your child adjust after lockdown.
Hi, I am Hussein and I am the Development Manager at the Learning South Leicestershire School Sports Partnership.
I would like to welcome our special guest today, Kathy Jones, who is a school counsellor at South Wigston High School, and Charlotte Bentley, who is a mental health practitioner at the Leicester Royal Infirmary. If you could both tell the listeners a bit about yourselves.
Okay, well, I've been working for several years now at South Wigston High School as a school-based counsellor, and I work one day a week as well in private practice with adults. I'm passionate about supporting people with their emotional health and well-being, and I'm very interested in the mind-body link because I think it's key, and I'm really delighted that this is coming through much more now, that our physical and mental well-being is really intertwined.
Yeah, so I've been a mental health nurse now for coming up for 12 years. I've worked at Leicester Royal for about 18 months now, working with people across all age groups, from children to adults. We've been working consistently through this whole period and have seen lots of different changes. So glad to be here today to be able to help you all.
From the student interactions you've had, what impact do you think the coronavirus period has had on children and young people?
So there's definitely been an increase on referrals concerns about the lockdown and lots of anxiety surrounding that. There's lots of anxiety, kind of like what comes next and what's going to happen in the future. And we've seen a lot of young people finding it really difficult to cope with the change in structure, the change in routine. A lot of people are describing feeling quite lonely and lost as well, with the loss of interaction with their friends and their peers in the home environment. We've also noticed there's quite a lot of emotions running quite high. So lots of people are describing feeling quite angry and quite frustrated. And we're noticing some more arguments within the family environments. So recognising that it's quite normal at the moment to feel quite angry and frustrated, but hopefully things will start changing for the better soon.
Thinking about the themes that have come through, and the two biggest, from my own experience, have been not seeing friends, that being locked in where they cannot physically go out and see their friends. And of course, that's such an important thing for teenagers particularly, because at this time of life, this stage of development, it is all about becoming independent and getting out there and making peer contacts and just drawing away from parents a little bit, but having that safe place to go back to. So that has been really hard because they've been stuck at base. And also a lot of worry about school, going back to school. What will it be like? Who will say what about my schoolwork? So those two factors I think came through particularly strongly.
Great stuff. What has the impact been on adults?
I think, again, one of the biggest ones that I've been hearing about is their panic over the schoolwork that their child is or isn't doing. A lot of concern about that, and I think it's put a lot of relationships under strain because parents have in effect sort of taken a bit of not a teacher role as such, but a more of an authoritative role than we might expect, and because they feel they have to try and make their child do some schoolwork. And of course, that is not easy, and we're hearing that in the national press. And making teenagers, or trying to encourage teenagers, is difficult. It's difficult. So there's a lot of concern about that. Quite a bit of concern expressed by parents about teenagers sort of being locked away in their bedrooms and not coming out. Now, I have to say as you know, having worked with teenagers for very many years, that is actually not all that unusual. But I think what's happened is a lot of parents, because they've been locked down with their teenagers, are realising just how much teenagers need their own space. And I think parents having to make a huge adjustment. It's that transition, isn't it, between the dependent little child who suddenly actually doesn't need mum, dad or carer anymore to the extent that they did. So that's been quite noticeable as well. Parents asking, you know, is it normal that they're just shut in their room? Well, it can be. It can be normal and it can be fine.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Kathy. I think you've touched upon the next question, really, in one of your previous answers. But a lot of students are apprehensive about going back to school. What advice would you give to them going back to school, or what advice would you give to prepare them to go back to school?
Yes, I think the first thing I would say is it's absolutely okay to be feeling nervous. What we feel is what we feel. What we do with it is the next question, but how we feel. It is completely expected that not only students but staff and parents will be and are anxious about the return to school. So all of us are living in this sort of strange world, aren't we? It's not something that the young people are going through by themselves. And I think that's an advantage for young people, because when they go back to school, if they can reassure themselves that the adults around them will get it, or we will get it because we've lived and are living through it with them. So it's not as if they've got to explain themselves in great depth about this awful experience they've been living with. We all get it because we've all been in it together. So I think that's one thing, to reassure themselves, to reassure, you know, young people, parents, staff as well. If you're going back to the same school as you left in March, remind yourself that the school building and how it looks is going to be very much the same. You are going to recognise it. There are going to be many things that you recognise about the school. It's really the routines that will have changed the most significantly, I think. And we're all adaptable. You know, young people change school once if they're going up to secondary school, or change teachers if they've moved from teacher to teacher in primary school. We are, as humans, quite adaptable. So certainly adapting to new routines, everybody will be there to help. And also don't forget that the staff will also be adapting to new routines. So again, that element that we're all in it together. If you're going to a new school, which I think is particularly unfortunate at this time, because you won't necessarily have had the smooth transition with the induction days and meeting teachers. Again, remind yourself that the adults there are going to absolutely, more than ever, want to bend over backwards to help you settle in. And you will make new relationships, you will make new friendships, and that would have happened anyway. Actually, that would have happened regardless of whether you've been in before or not. It just is all happening on a slightly different time scale. I also think we've got to congratulate ourselves on getting through this far. And finally, I think really importantly, if young people can believe us when we tell them that staff are not going to be cross about schoolwork. When schools go back in September or August, September, everybody from the top down are going to be there for supporting students who we all know have been through a very, very tough time. So our emphasis is on support, support, support. What can we do to help?
The first thing I would recommend is remembering that all schools have made changes to keep everybody safe in that environment. You need to trust what they're doing. It's in the best interest of everybody there. They're not there to punish you, they're there to support and advise you in the transition back to education with that ultimate goal of keeping everyone safe. I'd also advise there's always people around you to talk to, whether that's a family member, a sibling, a teacher. If you're worried about something, reach out to somebody and ask them what their advice would be. Okay, things have changed a lot in a short space of time, and there's a likelihood that advice could change again, but all we can do is move with it and accept it for what it is, because we're all in the same boat and we're all in this together. So you're not alone in this. Okay, all we can do our part by washing our hands, wearing our masks if that's to, and coughing and sneezing into your elbow.
Brilliant, thank you for that. So following lockdown, how can children keep healthy?
The main advice would be spending as much time outside as you can. So doing lots of activities, getting out for lots of walks, generally trying to get out of that home environment, because we've been locked down for so long now. It's about getting yourselves back out there. Okay. Something that might be helpful is setting yourself a challenge. So for example, if you're finding it difficult to get out a lot of times, you can pick a mountain and climb it on the stairs. Up and down the stairs is about 30 feet. See how many days it takes you to climb a mountain. The other important thing is, like I said, it is making sure you're talking to people who are around you, keeping eating healthy snacks, because eating healthy is really, really important. And there's lots of different resources on YouTube that you can use to do exercise, relaxation, breathing techniques, just to help keep you going if you're finding things tough.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So you've mentioned what children can do to keep healthy. Do you have any top tips, and how have you been keeping it for yourself?
Yeah. One of my main top tips would be keeping a structure and routine in your day. So for example, if you have football training or dancing on a certain day, keep that period of time as something that you do things in. So keep active during that time, so that structure's there. Another top tip that I would have is to keep a journal. So every night before you go to sleep, sit down and write down how your day went, and look at identifying 2 things out of that day that made you happy or that you were really, really proud of. And make a list of 2 things you're going to do tomorrow that you didn't manage to do today, because that will help give you some more structure and routine into your day. FaceTime with family and friends has also been a massive help for people, and trying to eat healthily and go for daily walks has always been very, very helpful to people.
Again, this mind-body link, it's keeping healthy, not just physically, but sort of psychologically as well. And I think what I put at the top of my sort of thoughts there is really about keeping connected with friends, family, or once we're going back to school, with school staff. Reach out, talk to your teachers, cultivate those little points of contact where maybe ask the teachers how they found lockdown. Anything to get conversation going where you're actually connecting with human beings. There are people who are more introverts, who prefer their own company, who don't need the constant connections. That's also okay. To those people, I'd say, make sure you've got an interest, a hobby, something that you're passionate about that you can use to help occupy your time if you're spending a lot of it through choice by yourself. And another thing is getting outside. There's something important about being in the fresh air, I find personally, but also I think it's well documented now. And what about learning a route that you can walk even if you don't feel like it? And by that I mean, is there a 10-minute walk that you can do round the block? Is there a 20-minute one? Is there a 30-minute one? Find a few different routes that you can just get out of the house, clear your head and come back. It's really difficult if you don't feel like it. And I think for teenagers, this is who are, for all the reasons that the neuroscience now backs up about, you know, they might not feel like it. Teenagers will often operate on how they feel rather than what they're actually thinking at that time. And I think with walking and physical exercise, that can be a conscious decision. You know, I don't feel like walking, but actually I'm going to go out for 10 minutes or I'm going to do my 30-minute route. Having that power over your own thinking, having that level of control, or learning to have that level of control to make you do yourself something that is good for you, even if you don't actually feel like it. Because by the time you've done that 10-minute walk or 20-minute walk, I doubt you'll be thinking the whole time round, I don't really want to be doing this. I think your mind will have taken you somewhere much more interesting. So there are sort of 3 things.
I've got a question before we do our student submission. So a few students have submitted some questions from the Robert Smythe Academy for us to answer during this podcast. But my question, and this was one of the questions in a previous topic or a topic before, is how do we normalise mental health? We know physical health is, we go to the doctor, it's part of our routine. If we're not feeling very well, we'll go to the doctor, we'll get our medicine. Whereas when we are feeling mentally unwell, there's a reluctance, or there's a stigma involved in us going and reaching out to, for example, someone to support us with our mental health. So my question is, how do we normalise mental health? What can we do to help people, encourage people to speak about their mental health?
The first thing I would say to that is remembering that it's okay not to be okay. Especially in the current climate, lots of people have been struggling, and people around you have probably been struggling without you even realising. So giving people that opportunity to talk about how they're feeling is so important. And remembering that just because you're feeling bad right now doesn't mean that it's going to feel like that in the future. So it's important to accept people for what they're struggling with and giving them that opportunity. If we were to look at it literally, if you'd broken your leg, you would go to the hospital, you would have your set treatment plan, and you would work with it. There's no reason why mental health shouldn't be exactly the same as that. If you needed a course of antibiotics for an infection, you'd take it. If people need support for their mental health, it should be exactly the same. We're working really, really hard to break down the stigma around mental health, because it's an illness, and people need help with that illness sometimes, and that's okay.
That's brilliant. That's a fantastic answer, that, to be fair. So we've had a few, as I said previously, we've had a few student submissions. So my first question from our student submissions is, how are we expected to just go back to normal?
Honest answer, you aren't. Normal as we know it, it's going to take a long time to get back to, and it's okay to be worried about that. The government guidelines and policies are there to protect us all, and as long as we all do our part, we can all stay safe. We're all in this together. So it's going to take time, but it's okay to be worried about it.
So we'll move on to the last student submission, and talking about that emotional resilience as well that's been tested during this lockdown period. What would happen if a second wave was to hit? Do you think we would be prepared for this?
Again, I think this boils down to the individual. We've done it once. Leicester haven't really finished or gone back into lockdown. I can't say, are we prepared? Because as individuals, it is different from are we prepared as a society. So thinking back to the individual, look at how you coped the first time. What helped? Ask yourself what helped, and get ready for that, to do more of that if we experience the second wave. Also, maybe ask yourself what didn't help. What part of lockdown the first time through was just, no, you don't want to do that again, or do it in that way again, and ditch that and find an alternative. Try something different. Yes, we're prepared in the sense we've done a lockdown already. So if there is another one, it's a little bit more familiar. I think in preparing for a second wave, should there be one, I think what would be really good is to talk to your friends, and this is adults or young people, tell them what worked, tell them what didn't, so that your group, your network is aware of what you need, and likewise you'll be hearing what your friends' needs are as well. And importantly as well, again, for young people and adults, if you had a really bad time, first time round, can you tell somebody? And it might be somebody at school, it might be somebody outside the family, or in the extended family, a relative. Getting connected, getting your connections ready in case there is a second wave when we go back into a longer term lockdown. Because the contact, I think, the connection gives us a purpose, And hopefully it does bring a little bit of hope. You know, if I remain connected, stay in touch, do all the other things like keeping as physically well as I can, looking at resources that help, then we've got some hope for when, if there's a second wave, it's going to end. You know, we'll come out of the second wave and we'll be okay.
What resources or organisations can people go to help children and adults?
So there's lots of places around us that can help keep us going, help when we're struggling with something, if we want to reach out for some advice from a professional, if we're struggling to speak to the people around us. Some of the main ones are, there's a service called Kooth, which is Kooth. There they have lots of discussion boards about a wide variety of subjects. You can keep a journal on there, you can set yourself goals, or you can use the chat to speak to qualified professionals, because there's always somebody there who will listen. Another good resource is a service called Shout. Now, Shout was set up by Prince William and Kate 18 months to 2 years ago, and it's a text service for young people. It's free to use. The number is 85258, and all you have to do is text Shout to that number, and an experienced and highly qualified professional will message you back to talk about how you're feeling and help you put some plans in place to stay safe. Childline is also another great resource for people, and it's got a lot of details on their website about how you can seek support or again speak to professionals if you're really struggling. There's a couple of mobile phone applications that people can download that are free to use. Some of these, one of them is called Staying Alive, which is a fab app if you're really struggling with staying safe. And another one is called Calm. Now, this is really good for relaxation, breathing techniques, meditation. It's really good to help in those periods of time if that anxiety is really running high. And for adults, there's a service called Turning Point, which number is 0808 800 3302. And this is a 24-hour telephone mental health support line for adults who are struggling with a wide variety of different mental health problems. And they're always there to listen and help if they can.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Charlotte. Some really useful websites and resources children and adults can use as well.
Thank you for listening to this episode in this series. If you have any questions about anything we have discussed, please comment below.